Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything, everything black. Culture over everything, y'all, we taking it back. Black.
Welcome to Left of Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're joined today by Miss Judy Richardson and also Charles E. Cobb. Ms. Richardson was a staff member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee between 1963 and 1966. She was also a contributing member of Black Side Incorporated, the film company that produced Eyes on the Prize. She served as an associate producer. Series producer. She also produced, while working with them, co-produced Malcolm X, Make It Plain, or Orlando Bagwell's documentary about Malcolm X, which won an Emmy and Peabody Award. And she's also senior producer with Northern Light Productions, where she also directed and produced Scarred Justice, the Orangeburg Massacre, 1968, and also Slave Catchers, Slave Resistors. She is the co-editor with 5 other women veterans of SNCC of Hands on the Freedom Plow, Personal Accounts by Women in SNCC, which was published from the University of Illinois Press. Will release the paperback edition this fall, and she is a board member, the e-version this fall, and she is a board member of the SNCC Legacy Project. We're also joined by Charlie Cobb, who from 1962 to 1967 served as the field secretary for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Mississippi. As a journalist, he started his career with WHUR Radio in Washington, D.C. He also served as a foreign affairs reporter for National Public Radio, where he offered some of the first coverage of Africa for NPR. He is most recently the author of The Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed, How Guns Made the Civil Rights Possible. And both Judy and Charlie are here as SNCC Digital Gateway visiting scholars here at Duke University. Welcome to the both of you for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you for having us, Mark.
So this is an amazing moment for both of your presence here at Duke and doing the kind of work that we do. On the first part, you know, we've seen with all of these anniversaries, the anniversary of Freedom Summer, the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, right? Suddenly there's a focus on what happened 50 years ago. But we're also seeing this new energy from young folks in the country. Internationally, when we consider what happened in South Africa a few weeks ago, with them challenging the raise of tuition rates. Given the work that you did not so long ago, and the kind of vision that you imagine for the future, are you surprised by some of the energies that we're seeing now in this country amongst young folks? Start with you, Charlie.
Well, the short answer is no. I mean, I think what I've noticed, kind of just studying the history of black people in this country, you get various periods in which you see an eruption of activism and protest, almost always initiated and led by young people. And after what could be called a fairly latent period, after the passage of the various Civil Rights Acts, you're seeing now again an eruption of young people, and it's almost always around a specific issue. In this case, really, I would argue that police violence against young black men has triggered this eruption of activism, and I don't find myself surprised by it, and I find that it resonates with my own experience as a young person 50 years ago.
How about yourself, Judy?
I gotta say, I was surprised, because, I mean, both Charlie and I taught around, and you go through all these campuses, and you got a sense before all of this happened that, people were getting a little lax. They hadn't really felt the need to do this, and there's always been police brutality, and even when we were doing Eyes on the Prize, you always found it's about police brutality. In Detroit, in Watts, that's the through line. Right. But so there had always been that happening, and I just assumed it was going to be like, all of the older activists on whose work we built. Their thing was always, even the Montgomery bus boycott, their thing was always, we may not see the change that we're working and dying for in some cases, but you got to do it, because if you don't, nothing changes. So I assumed I would be part of that too. I would be doing the stuff, and then, I'd go off and, pass away, and maybe nothing would have changed yet. And so for me, it really was wonderful.
One of the things that's interesting about this moment, when I think about the work that your generation did, y'all were very much in conversation with the generation before you. I think about just the weight of a figure like Paul Robeson on your generation. There was some institutional memory, if you will. What I find very interesting about this moment is that somehow those connections have been lost, right? That there is no institutional memory amongst young folks. We don't do a very good job of that in terms of public schooling. We don't always do a very good job with that on college and university campuses. Have you found that some of the young folks have been willing, A, to reach out to folks like Judy Richardson and Charlie Cobb? And if they haven't, have they been receptive to you, Judy, when they've had a chance to connect with you?
Yes, I think what's great is that there are a number of folks, because we were their age then. See, it wasn't like we were the NAA or even the ministers at SCLC. We were young like they were.
You were the Black Lives Matter
yes, exactly.
generation to SCLC and NAACP Urban League and those kinds of groups.
That's right. And we had a Ms. Baker who was absolutely crucial to helping us to develop. But the other part was, I think, we had a conference right here at Duke for voting rights.
Right.
And with that, we brought together SNCC activists who were doing on-the-ground work like Charlie. And then other people, young people from Black Lives Matter and the larger network of Black Lives Matter. And United We Dream, and the Dream Defenders, and all of those folks. And listening to them, and there was an interaction. It wasn't like, we the older people will tell you what to do. It really was, so what are you all doing, and how does it relate to, and how do we work? So, and those are continuing conversations with the SNCC Legacy Project. So it really is, there is an interaction ongoing, kind of.
I think there's more interaction today than there was when we were activists in the 1960s. Yes, there's Paul Robeson and other
Ella
people,
Baker,
Ella Baker, of course, specifically interacting with SNCC. But most of our interaction with older people wasn't really at that level. In terms of SNCC, it was at the grassroots. The older NAACP activists from the 30s and 40s who headed or led local NAACP chapters. They never made the national media. That's who we were really interacting with as grown-ups. And in terms of today, I found really since the SNCC Legacy Project was created, there's been a fairly steady effort of young activists to interact with us. Not so much in terms of planning acts of protests or activism. They just want to dip into our experience to see what's useful today. I've, at least speaking for myself, I can't speak for everybody, I found that there's been a steady effort ever since the emergence of groups like Black Lives Matter, Dream Defenders, Moral Mondays, Million Hoodies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's been, they are at some level at least aware of what we try to do. And to me, it seems like they're more aware of what we tried to do than I remember being aware of what older activists were trying to do in the 30s and 40s. And those were the people whose shoulders we stood.
You're watching Left of Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're here in the John Hope Franklin Center. We're joined by SNCC veterans Charlie Cobb Jr. and also Judy Richardson, talking about the past and the future, if you will. Charlie, I know that you just hopped on Twitter.
Young people put me on Twitter.
A few months ago. And so, a big part of the conversation these days, is about the use of online platforms like Twitter, Facebook, new technologies. We know that every generation has a new technology that it gravitates to. For your generation that was organizing, what were some of the new tools that you can employ to do the kind of organization that you did?
I think there are two things that come immediately to mind, which may or may not have meaning to people under 30 today. One is the mimeograph machine, which enabled us to duplicate material, and which were key to getting people out for mass meetings, to circulating information, in a broader sense you could say print.
Yeah.
The second thing, which I know is not in many people's conscious, it would be something called the WATS line, which was an acronym for the Wide Area Telephone Service, which enabled you to...
It was like an 800 number.
Yeah, it's like an 800 number today, but for a single flat fee. Have a whole network of telephone communication, which made long-distance calls affordable, which is important if you're organizing, because if you're in jail or being attacked or something, it's important that people be able to easily... So I tell the young activists that I'm totally envious.
What you could have done with Twitter,
yeah,
right?
We had Twitter or email or Facebook or Instagram or a lot of other stuff I don't even understand.
Yeah.
Young people put me on Twitters because they told me that's the only way I'd be able to keep up with their conversation. But it's no substitute for grassroots organizing.
Right, or the networks.
Right.
I mean, the reason that the 800 number worked for us is because we could call the Friends of SNCC office in Chicago or Detroit or on UC Berkeley, because we had developed those networks.
Right.
We had somebody sitting in the national office who was head of Campus Friends of SNCC, head of Friends of SNCC. We had a research department that understood how you have to have the research when you contact some of these groups, when you contact the media. You need to know how many people are registered, how many folks got shot, you need all of that information. So there was a national office. So it's not just that we had the Mimeo and we had the 800 number. It was also that we had the networks that put us in touch with all of these people out there that we had developed, the networks we had developed.
And that's directly related to grassroots organizing, literally knocking on doors and sitting on front porches and going to church and eating dinner and a whole lot of things that put you in direct contact.
I mean, that's one of the things...
Excuse me, no, because they're both, to me, they are related, but they are a little different.
Yeah.
That's the on-the-ground work.
Right.
The networks I'm talking about are the national networks that are getting out the word
Right.
about what
Folks
they're doing
who
on the
sit
ground.
in the office, right?
Exactly.
And, you know, right.
All over the country.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is probably not so different even in this moment. You know, you do have grassroots activists involved in Black Lives Matter. But then there are those folks, I mean, DeRay, McKeeson talks about this. I mean, his job is to do Twitter, right? You know, which is not different than someone sitting in a national office, making those kind of phone calls and keeping tabs. You know, one of the things you just mentioned, Judy, you mentioned the research component, right? Because there's always this feeling that young folks are working, they're improvisational, right? They're just coming up with ideas, oh, let's go do this. And sometimes what gets missed is that there are folks who are actually doing research around strategy, around connecting with different organizations that could potentially be allies. Talk a little bit about that research component.
There was a crusty old white guy named Jack Minnis, who was the head of research.
Right.
Yeah, head
the
of
numbers
research for
crunching,
SNCC.
right.
And more than that, I mean, this is before, you'll see this online, but this is a chronology of races of police brutality, violence, and intimidation in Mississippi since '61. This is what Jack put out in advance of the 1964 Summer Project, Freedom Summer.
Right.
And the reason was, for the same reason that all of us now, I used a chronology when I was doing police brutality in New York City in the 80s. Because the point is to show it's not just some errant policeman who hasn't had enough sensitivity training. It's a system of police brutality within that entire police department. That's what this did. It showed it's not just Sheriff Clark, it's not just so-and-so, it is a system. And this is how you know this. All of these incidents from '61. Jack is also the one who, when Stokely says, we want to figure out what to do in Lowndes County, for the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, it is Jack who says, let me research the laws of Alabama. And it's he who finds out there's a way that you can do this, an independent Black political party. So all of that is part of the research effort that we're doing.
Yeah, and it's something I think that almost gets missed sometimes, because even when we think about the Black Panther Party in their early days, and Bobby Seale and Huey Newton are taking law school classes, and they're reading the California State Constitution, right? So they know what they can do and not do, even if the police officers, who are charged with policing, don't know what the laws are.
That's right.
And SNCC's research department brings up another point that's worth stressing. SNCC had more field organizers across the South than any of the civil rights organization. And the way the national headquarters took shape in terms of its communications department, in terms of its research department, was in service to the field work. You know,
Right.
the mission of the national office was to give the field organizers what they needed
Provided
to
support.
both do
Right.
their work and advance their work. It's
Yeah.
a point that's missed about SNCC's own dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, some of the great work that the historian Charles Payne has done
Oh,
to
yes.
talk about the organizational structure
Yeah.
of SNCC, which was as much a part of the genius of that moment as it was the actual minds and people who were doing the work.
You know, I mean, you see that. I mean, SNCC was the only organization, not with a research department, the only organization with a photographic department, the only organization with its own print shop, and the only organization with its own communications
I
department.
want to talk about that photographic point in a moment. And you're watching Left of Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're here in the John Hope Franklin Center. We're joined by SNCC veterans Judy Richardson and Charlie Cobb. It's not lost on me that both of you, you know, once you move past the movement, choose media careers. You know, as if, you know, you mentioned the photographic department, you mentioned the print shop, almost as if you knew, you know, if you didn't document this moment, you could never trust mainstream media to document it. You could trust black media, whether it be black radio or
And
black
not always
radio
there either.
stations, right? But you know, they're also dealing with infrastructure issues and what have you. So it's not lost on me that both of you went into media careers. You know, I'll start with you, Charlie. Talk about why you made that particular choice.
First, in terms of how SNCC evolved, the tip of the hat has to be given here to Jim
Hello.
Foreman. Because a lot of this came out of his own creative brain. Jim was a trained historian, and he was always telling us, you gotta put it down.
Write it down, write it down.
Write it down. You know, he was the executive director. So you have to, you know, in terms of understanding
Right,
this,
right.
pay special tribute to Jim Foreman's SNCC executive director on this. Media is, my movement into media is a longer story than we have time for. Suffice to say, for a variety of reasons, both here in the United States and as a result of living overseas. I lived overseas in East Africa, in Tanzania, for 2 years. I became aware, even independently of my own frustrations with media as
Right.
a SNCC field secretary, I became increasingly aware of the importance of media and writing, you know, what you saw and interpreting what you were experiencing. And I was lucky in the sense of WHUR was established and I was able to begin working for them, which led to work for first NPR and then other agencies, National Geographic,
Yeah.
Frontline, and so forth. The main point is I felt way back in those beginning years, as I feel now, it's important to get our thinking out there.
Yeah.
You know, our, you know, interpretations of the world around us out there. I felt very strongly about that and increasingly strongly about that in the years after SNCC.
You know, Judy, I was a senior in college when Eyes on the Prize, you know, first launched. And so I can remember what it was like being in college and you're trying to put the pieces together, all this, and suddenly, you know, someone had curated all of this for us in a way that had never been pulled together for us, that we had never seen. And I'm sure you could trace an explosion of black documentary filmmakers, right, to that moment of them watching Eyes on the Prize. Talk about some of the groundwork that went into that vision. Of course, the great Henry Hampton, you know, so critical to this process. But what are folks thinking about as they're trying to document this historical moment? And what are some of the challenges getting folks to understand that, you know, to buy into the idea of it, to provide funding for it? I mean, there's no crowdsourcing at this period of time, right?
That's right.
You know, there's no
That's right.
Kickstarter that you can do
Yes.
to do Eyes on the Prize.
Well, I think, first of all, I was the first paid employee. That was 78 before it becomes really Eyes on the
Wow.
Prize and goes from 6 hours to then 14 hours, you know. In 78, I had no experience with film. Henry just knew, nobody knows Black Side. Judy is coming out of the film company, out of the civil rights movement.
Right.
I was moving to Boston, and he said, well, come on, do this thing, right? So I become, at that point, the associate producer, but the only paid employee. And what I'm looking at is there is nothing about the regular people who did the movement, who founded it, who sustained it. The only thing that was out there as a film was Montgomery to Memphis, and that, right?
Which
and everything was Dr.
right,
King.
right.
And not only just Dr. King, even when he went to Birmingham, you didn't get Reverend Shuttlesworth, you just got Dr. King. So that's the only thing I could see. Simple Justice was great because it was storytelling all of the people, regular people, who made up the folks who go into the 1954 Supreme Court decision. But other than that, wasn't anything out there. When I'm looking for women even, when I find Joanne Robinson, that's in that 78 period. And Joanne Robinson was head of the co-chair of the Women's Political Council in the Montgomery bus boycott, right? Well, I find her because I'm reading Strive Toward Freedom. And I finally find the name of a woman. And it's like, oh, whoa, you know. And then I ask one of the first black reporters for the New York Times, C. Gerald Fraser, and he says, well, and he's clearly tired of me because I've asked him too many times how to find somebody, you know. He said, well, you know, Judy, sometimes people are listed in the phone book. I call in LA and she's listed. She is so happy to finally be able to tell her story. But what EYES does is it changes the focus from only Dr. King to all of the regular people who did this movement. So when young people see Eyes on the Prize, for the first time, they see people who look like them, who are their cousins and their mothers and their clergy people like them, who are making this movement. And it changes. And after that is when you also start getting the local movement history. And some of those had already started that. But we did a school before we started EYES, before we did all of the productions in Black Side. Always grounded in the research, even dissertations unpublished. Always looking for what helps us really ground this in terms of what really happened. And then you're bringing in activists and media people and other folks into the school. But all of it is to help ground the production team so that you tell the series, you know, halfway correctly, you know.
I keep thinking, you know, I discovered Fred Hampton.
Yes.
because of Eyes on the Prize.
The second series of Eyes, which I wish they would put back on again. You'll see Eyes 1. Most schools only know that there's the first 6 hours. That second 8 hours is more relevant to what we're dealing with now.
Absolutely, absolutely. You two have been organizing for more than 50 years.
Oh, God.
What does it mean to the two of you, you know, to still be here, to still be doing the work, to be able to reconnect as you do, you know, even briefly here, you know, for a week or so at Duke?
Well, I mean, it's like you have an obligation. You know, if I look back, or we look back at our history, we find that there was always members of an older generation passing their experience, opening up networks that they had developed. In some instances before we were born, as is the case with, say, the Southern Negro Youth Congress. And in a sense, we are who they once were in the 21st century, and have the same obligation or the same inclination to interact with the younger activists that we see emerging. And as a practical matter for me, in addition to all of that, which is more complex as a political statement than the few words I've said here, as a practical matter, as a writer, it helps me form a language to convey the story I'm trying to convey in my own writing about the era in which I was doing work in the Deep South, because my writing now has shifted almost completely from foreign affairs to the South. And being on a college campus and hearing and speaking to young people or wherever, as a practical matter, as a writer, is helpful to me.
I also think it's helpful that we have, you know, the network we developed in SNCC 50 years ago is our network. I mean, we have
Still
other
is.
networks,
It still is
but it
a
still
network.
is because
Right.
we were forged in that struggle. So the bonds were what the kind of bonds that young people form anyway at 18, 19, 20 years old, but they're trying to kill us. So, there is that extra thing that comes on it. And so even though we might have argued, I mean, SNCC meetings could go on for 4 hours, for days, 4 hours, 4 days. But the point is that we have a common sense of what struggle is, what we're supposed to be about. You're supposed to make a difference. When you come out, get out of here, you're supposed to help change something. And so there is a sense that we have what Charlie's talking about, that responsibility. But my closest friends are still the friends who are doing a lot of different things. And it's not just like people doing grassroots organizing still. It's things like, Israeli-Palestine matters. Dottie Zone is up there doing Jewish Voice for Peace. I mean, it's come into a lot of different ways. But we never stopped. It's not just that we're still here.
Right.
We're not sitting in any rocket.
Right.
That's one of the unique things I think about the SNCC people, is that for the most part, people have continued all of
Kept
their
it
lives to
moving. Kept it
make
moving.
some kind of change. Obviously, we're not doing the same thing we were doing
Right.
when we were 20 or 21, but people, and we talk to each other about what we're doing.
You've been watching Left of Black. We have been honored today to have Judy Richardson and Charlie Cobb in studio. Veterans of SNCC, folks who are still doing the good work for the good people. Thank you very much, Judy and Charlie, for joining us here today.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark, for having me.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black, everything black. Culture over everything, y'all. We taking it back. Black.